Welcome back to Stinging Back, where we expose the truth behind online sting operations and the government misconduct hiding in plain sight. This episode is about belief, fate, and betrayal, how the government manufactures the crime. I'm A.
And I'm M. We've decided to bring D on because he's a good guy, good co-host, and brings a lot of information to the group. Today we're walking you through exactly how the government manufactures the very crimes it claims to be preventing. This isn't just a theory, it's a well-worn playbook. One we've seen repeated over and over again in thousands of cases across the country, and it always follows the same 3 steps.
Step 1, they create the belief. In step 2, they induce the conversation. And in step 3, they get the guys to show up.
Let's break it down, starting with step 1, creating the belief. This is where the government lays the foundation of the crime they want to build. It's not about stopping actual predators, it's about inventing a scenario, pushing it onto someone who never imagined it, and then prosecuting them for believing in it.
Or supposedly believing in it. And here's what's important to remember. During any investigation or trial, constitutional rights are supposed to protect the accused. The Fifth Amendment protects against self-incrimination and guarantees due process. The 14th Amendment ensures equal protection under the law and prohibits the government from depriving anyone of life, liberty, or property without due process. But what happens when the government itself manufactures a scenario, manipulates the individual into it, and then punishes them for reacting to it?
In episode 8, we broke down the script behind the setup, the manipulative tactics used by decoys in the stings to manufacture a crime. Getting the man to say certain things in a conversation is just one part of what police need. The conversation isn't spontaneous or willful, it's orchestrated by the decoy, not the target. It's guided, manipulated, and often driven by psychological pressure until it produces the responses law enforcement is fishing for.
And in this episode, we're unpacking the other 2 pieces of that puzzle, how they implant a belief that didn't originate with the man, how they manipulate that belief into action, and how they get someone to show up, not to commit a crime, but to confirm whether the wild fantasy pushed on them was even real. And yes, we'll revisit the script too.
By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly how the system has twisted the law, weaponized fantasy, and violated constitutional rights, all in the name of justice. But as you'll see, there's no justice in it.
Okay, so here we go. Let's break this down. In step 1, they are creating the belief. The government lays the foundation of the crime they want to build. They don't use the age of a minor on the accounts, profiles, or ads they use, and then wait for someone to come across it and reach out to them. This is what they have misled the public to believe they do, but it's not at all what they do. Instead, they create a bizarre, unrealistic fantasy and then tell the men to believe it. It's not a belief the men formed on their own. It's one they were manipulated into accepting. And the fantasy sounds like this. A sexually mature, sexually confident so-called minor logs onto an adult platform and starts chatting with random grown men, initiating sex talk and inviting them over for casual sex with no supervision and no consequences.
Or even worse, a parent or a sibling who says, "Come help me sexually abuse my kid or younger sibling." That's not just a lie, that's a government-designed delusion. And here's the kicker, the men don't come up with it. The government does. The men didn't walk into the internet looking for this. He was told to believe it.
That's right. The men didn't walk around thinking, oh, there must be a minor somewhere here that I can find to meet for, casual sexual hookup, or there must be someone here offering kids, that I can find to go meet for this. So Even if the man entertains the idea, it's not his own belief. It was planted by the government. At best, he thinks, well, this could be a minor, but legally that's not enough. The law says he must believe it to be a minor, not might be, not could be. It has to be actual belief.
And that belief wasn't natural. It was induced. The government said, here's a wild fantasy, now we dare you to believe it. And if he does, they pounce. But if he doesn't, they push harder.
It's a government manufactured crime. And the only reason to plant such a fantasy is because they want someone to act on it. That's bad faith. That's misconduct. It's entrapment. It has nothing to do with trying to save or protect children from online predators like they claim. Dee, you've looked at some of these chats and scenarios up close. How would you describe the psychological pressure that's put on the target to buy into this wild fantasy they create?
Well, as we know, whenever you go to an online hookup site, as a man, you have a lot of competition. And when one of these sting operators come at you with what they're introducing as an illegal thing, you feel pressured because it's like, yeah, it's probably someone who's got this weird kink. I may be getting catfished. There's a lot of possibilities that's going on because there's no shortage of catfishing being done on the internet. A lot of times you'll look at the pictures and go, yeah, no, that's an adult. And that alone, is more confidence for you to continue the conversation. And in some of these websites, the sting operator will actually list role play as one of their activities. So it's a very slippery slope. It's rather the secret sauce to these stings is they keep an element of doubt in the person they're trying to entrap mind.
So, what you're saying is not everything on the internet is real or truthful?
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, and from what we've seen, do most of the people seem convinced? Or are they just confused, hesitant, maybe even testing the waters, but still unsure?
I would say still unsure. And it would not be a problem. I want to say it would not be a problem if the government would just simply do these things correctly. Go to places where there's going to be children, right? Go to some type of child's game that's online, something where there's going to be children. Going to a place where there's not going to be children and pretending to be one, it sets the standard for someone thinking that this is some type of kink or role play. So it's an alienation of the evidence finding process because I'm looking at these pictures of Rue Powell and her sting, where you can quite obviously see this woman, even though Rue Powell might appear to be young at age 42, right? She's quite obviously not a child. So when you look at these pictures, it's pretty bluntly obvious. This is somebody engaging in some type of role play.
So you've seen some of these chats, and we've talked about them on here as well. And from what you have seen and what we have, talked about, what would you say about how the government uses the repetition and escalating suggestions? Is that something you'd call suggestive conditioning?
It's government grooming. It's 100% government grooming. They know what they're doing. They do it anyway, and they do it anyway for grant money. Here recently, the grant money is being dried up. Whether the DOJ is starting to self-recognize that this is entrapment and it's really not even the person committing the crime. Um, it's starting to dry up.
I hope it keeps going in that direction because that's what needs to happen.
It is. Government grant money going away is not entirely a bad thing. If they could limit it to make actually good cases instead of just throwing money at these people that are not even government actors to conduct stings, that would be better because it would encourage them to actually make better cases instead of trying to, destroy people's lives in order to make money.
Right. I can't even believe Ruth Powell is getting government money to do this. She's not saving or protecting anybody. She's soliciting men for sex.
Well, she's
Now,
not anymore.
what was so? Does she have a nonprofit? Is that where she's getting her grants, or where? How is she getting this money?
I believe.
Right now she's getting donors, but beforehand she was getting grant money from the federal government that essentially we're paying. You got your seat on. We're paying this person to engage in unethical, illegal acts in order to arrest men that, by all means, are probably functioning members in society and turn them into registered sex offenders.
Well, she just recently put out an email or sent out an email begging donors for money because she said the government was cutting back on this funding. So
Right.
that's why I assumed she was getting government money to pretend to be, this teenage girl who's desperate for sex with random adult strangers that she's soliciting online on adult sex websites. You've seen the pictures, right, of her ads?
Oh, yes. So, just going to describe the picture in question. It's where she's standing at a mirror. She's wearing a sports bra with, I guess, sweatpants. And you see that she's fully developed. She's got fully developed breasts. She's got some wrinkles on her forehead. Um, she's in a sexually explicit pose. Another picture's her in panties, rear end on the mirror where you can see it. And she's advertising herself as some type of sugar baby at age 19. And then it lists all the kinks and role play she's into, correct? So, just to name off the most concerning one is role play.
And it
So,
also it also has explicit language there, like she wants to F, right?
yes, so she's introducing that thought into people's minds.
Hmm.
So, how does all this differ from a real situation where someone actually sets out to harm a child versus what we see in these situations?
I'm just going to say the quiet part out loud. Um, the scenarios they create don't happen. They don't happen.
It's a wild fantasy they created about kids.
Correct. That's why there are so many people saying, I thought it was somebody engaging in some type of role play because it's such an unrealistic scenario that occurs. You follow it up with what you're seeing in the pictures. This is a fully developed adult in her 40s. It's really, it's really silly. In fact, she's got a 5-star review, as I can see it.
Yeah, that is clearly a sexually mature adult. And not even that, it looks like a professional adult who does this, right? A sex worker.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. As she has 2 reviews and 5 stars, so someone really liked her.
Yep.
All right. Well, now let's talk about step 2, the conversation. We broke this down in episode 8. This is where the setup becomes a script because it's not just about belief. They want the right words, words that make it easier to secure a conviction.
So remember, what the decoy says is carefully crafted. They'll throw out lines like, I delete my messages because my aunt checks my phone. Or, I'll get in trouble if they find out I'm talking to you. Don't tell anyone about this.
That's not innocent role play. That's bait. They're baiting the man to reply with something like, "Okay, it'll be our secret," or I don't want you to tell anyone. Then boom, they call that grooming.
Dee, you've seen this pattern a lot in these cases. What stands out to you about the way police steer the conversation to extract those so called grooming words?
Wonder, so he starts calling it out. Like, what do you mean you're home alone? I mean, if you're the age you say you should be, shouldn't you be with somebody? Oh no, they just left me. Huh, odd. Um, it's enough to make it look incriminating in a jury trial.
Well, and what's really more odd is that they're telling people the public, courts and juries and everybody to believe that because a young teen, may get left home alone and they're bored and feel neglected, out of everything that they could do and everywhere online they could go, they would go to an adult sex website to solicit random adult strangers for sex.
So let's say their argument out loud. So the supposed young girl is getting on the internet, going to an adult website where adults meet for casual encounters. And she creates a profile. She goes through all the verification processes to ensure that she is above the age. And most of the ages on these websites are 19 and above. And she gets on there and passes all the stuff, confirms the email, and puts the age on there as 20, 19, and then posts extremely sexually explicit photos. And then they wonder, wow, look at these men who are really aroused by this woman that is profiling herself as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And then you include, someone putting in the role play activity that we see here in this RuPaul Sting profile. It's enough for a person to reasonably say, yeah, this person is not a minor. So we talk about what percentage of surety are you when you go to this meetup place for a casual encounter? Are you 20% sure? Are you 80% sure? Are you 100% sure? Because it matters. Essentially, what the government is doing is they are tricking people into committing crimes. And they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I look at this and it reminds me of the Tuskegee experiment, where the government comes along, they tell you, hey, you got bad blood. Not bad blood? Oh, no. They're like, well, we'll treat you. Meanwhile, they're injecting these black farmers with syphilis to study their behaviors with syphilis, like we didn't already know what syphilis does to people.
Mm-hmm.
And this continues on for 40 years. I believe it started somewhere in the 1940s, maybe in the 1930s. These people only got an apology at 1997 by Bill Clinton. So it's government gaslighting. Whenever somebody views this YouTube and they're skeptical, I understand they're skeptical. I don't blame you. And you should be. You should be skeptical about everything on the internet. But that being said, the rudimentary question you need to ask yourself, do I trust the government? Has the government given me enough background in their history of behavior for me to trust them? If your answer is yes, I do, Vietnam was a good war, Tuskegee experiment was fine, Ruby Ridge was okay with me, then hey, go for it, be all right with it. Don't watch us. But on the other hand, if you disagree and you feel like the government's not always honest, if they've shown us they are not honest, keep on, tag along. Because what we're telling you is experiences based upon many people who are innocent and in prison.
And it's a fact.
These same tactics have been going on for 15, 20 years or more.
Let's Salem witch trial, guys. Was it 32 people that got burned alive before common sense came into play and said, whoa, hey, let's get these people due process.
Let's get these girls to, yeah.
So what we're seeing is the same thing over and over again. History repeats itself.
Yeah, our government has a long history of doing really evil things to people. And people now still have a hard time believe that the government could do something so evil to citizens.
Right.
And it keeps happening. It's crazy.
We keep falling for it.
We do.
Because and they don't want to educate us either, so.
It's so evil, it's hard for people to wrap their heads around it. And that's why people, and when they say, oh, other men didn't fall for it, or then, they blocked the minor and moved on. You don't know that they blocked the minor because they believed it was a minor. They must have known, they could have known this is, a sting operation. I want nothing to do with it. Or this person is dumb. I don't want to play this game with them. So I'm going to move on. I don't want to waste my time on that. But to say, that ordinary people wouldn't fall for this is just wrong, because that's exactly why there are thousands of men who have fallen for this. And when you compare that to the percentage of how many have actually, like people that have actually victimized minors, there's a huge difference in the percentage of how many have been caught in a sting operation compared to how many have real victims of this. So that shows that ordinary people are falling for this. These are ordinary men that were not a risk or danger to children. They played along with someone else's fantasy, and then they wanted to confirm who this person was. Huge difference.
I agree. And I've spoken to many of the members in Cage. And let me just say, I have met evil. You don't meet it often. You really don't. But I've met evil before. And these men are not evil. To me, they were just misunderstood, misrepresented.
When you met evil, does it look like Tim Ballard?
Absolutely, it looks like Tim Ballard.
RuPaul?
Yeah,
it looks like RuPaul. Yep.
Chris Hansen?
Yeah.
It's somebody who is camouflaging with virtue signaling so they can go do their acts. Look at the tally. I mean, I would love to see his receipts on how he got these guys to come over. That he would later on shave bald, beat on, tattoo, make eat disgusting things. It's awful.
Yeah, the Vitali, yeah.
I don't think a lot of cases had integrity. I'm not going to sit here and say that all the cases they made were bad cases. I don't know all the cases. I can only talk about the cases I have heard. And a lot of the cases I have heard have not been good cases. You see that in the court system. If they had good cases, they would prosecute and send that person to prison within, I would say, a 4 to 3 month period. It would be like that. It'd be done. What are we seeing? 3 years, 6 years, 2 years?
6 to 8 years, some of them.
Yeah, that's not. We're going to give you due process. No, that's
and I mean
football.
And we mean not 6 to 8 years prison time they got. We mean 6 to 8 years are still waiting for their trial. Just to make that clear.
Yes, it's ridiculous, and it undermines the Constitution.
That's why they do plea offer after plea offer.
Yes, it's district attorneys passing the football.
And they're supposedly very worried about these men being a danger to children. It's insane. Okay, let's move on to some more of their deceptive tactics. So sometimes the decoy will ask, "Are you a cop?" Which leads the man to respond, "No, I'm not. Are you?" And then that response gets twisted. Suddenly, they claim he was suspicious because he knew it was illegal. He knew this was a minor. But in reality, he would have never asked that if the decoy hadn't suggested it first.
Sometimes a man does ask that kind of question because he senses something's off, like he's being catfished. He's trying to make sense of a fantasy that doesn't feel real, something that feels scripted, fake, pushed. Like the poor women that were scammed by the guy using the images of Brad Pitt asking for money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, geez. I'm embarrassed to even say this, but my own mother, she started dating kind of late in life after her divorce. And she went to go brag to me one day. She's like, "Hey, son, I've got this military man who's a millionaire. In fact, he's a millionaire. And he's wanting to marry me as soon as he gets home from the army. And he just needs $5,000.
Oh, that's it, right?
Yeah. So the internet's full of scams. And people generally don't believe what's going on is because the nature that they're going to is usually a scam. They hope that it's not because they're just so gosh darn lonely. And it's the perfect tool to manipulate someone who is not a criminal, someone who has no predisposition to engage in criminal activity, in order to go do it. I had to sit my mom down and explain to her that this was some type of Photoshop picture of a guy, his rank's not even right. For her not go and get $5,000 to send this man. She had already bought the wedding dress.
Yeah, because she's not that type of person that she couldn't wrap her head around why somebody would do this to somebody else. It's hard to understand and believe.
And that's why when we're going into jury trials, who are the people that are getting scammed by these India phone calls? It's the older generation. Mm-hmm. And God bless them. They have such a high level of trust for people they don't know. And I love it. I'm here for it. I would straight up die for these people. But the government is it's depending on these people that don't understand all these role plays, all these kinks, the internet. How many times have we been called to a grandmother's house or a mother's house to say, "Hey, the TV's not working"?
Yes.
What do you want me to do about that?
But, like you said, the internet's full of scams. It's also full of scammers who are looking for vulnerable people to scam. And the role that the decoys play in these proactive sting operations is exactly the role of a scammer. They use the exact same tactics. They play on their victims' vulnerabilities and, tell those victims things, that they think the victim wants to hear and tries to make it seem like it's okay. It's okay. I've been with older guys and this and that. And basically they are the scammer and they are getting money from doing this. So they are truly, it's fraud. They're the
So what you
scammer.
guys are saying is there's reason for guys to be skeptical of these things?
Well, the government says we should not question it. We should just believe that it's real and that, there are real children out there that are, they just get bored. And so when they get bored, they get desperate for sex. So they go online looking for random adult male strangers to invite over to have sex with. That's what the government is telling us to believe. Isn't it interesting how those defense attorneys are not presenting it that way in, trials? But if they did, I bet that would really catch the jury's attention.
That's because this scam, even though it's old, they hit counties like a gypsy. They go to county, they make a few cases just enough to get grant money, and then they move on and they leave the courts going, well, "What the hell am I going to do with this?"
Yeah, they go
So
to small counties a lot too. I've seen that pattern as well.
yeah, so you end up going through district attorney to district attorney. Some new law firm, dropout is trying to get their name in the criminal justice field, so they take on a DA job, and they look at this and they go, "I don't feel like I need to morally place myself in this case, but if I drop the case, then I'm going to be hazed by the people who voted me in. It's not a good way to start my case or my career." So you get this sentiment where it's like past football with DAs.
Yeah. So D, going back to this, we know like, the decoy creates a conversation by using certain lines to fish, for certain responses. How common do you think it is that the man is actually trying to test the situation, not because he's looking to commit a crime, but because he's uncomfortable and skeptical?
That's such a nuance that no one understands is how uncomfortable these guys feel when they're going through this thing. Um, I'm sorry, what was the question?
How common do you think it is that the man is actually just trying to test the situation, and he's playing along not because he's looking to commit a crime, but because he's uncomfortable and he's skeptical. He just wants to know more about this really odd situation he's presented with.
Guy's on an adult website. If he wasn't comfortable with it, if he wasn't sketched out by it, if he didn't feel this weird curiosity about himself to do a somewhat investigation on it, because you're looking at this person who's an adult telling you they're not the adult. It's God, it's like putting a big red button in a room and telling me not to push it. I'm so curious now. Why are you doing this? And I said, yeah, and I'm sure they're 100%.
Yeah, and the conversation is just not natural.
Well, it's because it's all scripted. It's just not a natural conversation. They even tell the men to bring things, condoms, lube, candy soda. Why? It's not because the man asks. It's because the decoy needs props and they make the suggestion. They want a list they can show in court or flash in the media, something that paints a picture of predation, not curiosity. Not hesitation, not intent, not curiosity. You don't hear how many times the guy says, I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't a minor. I knew it wasn't.
D, let's talk about that. The prop list. In your experience, how are these items used in court? And what's the reality behind how they get brought up in the chat in the first place?
they're brought up by the decoy. They're really just used to incriminate the I'm gonna just say male, because that's the only people that are getting caught up in these, because it's quite clearly a violation of the Federal Equal Protection Act. But it's just used to further incriminate the person. You brought candy because it was a child. Well, I mean, I'm an adult and I eat candy. I mean, what are you getting at? It's again, it's enough to keep the person viewing it, you know, not confident but skeptical.
Yeah, they use that to make him look like he was grooming a child, like, "Oh, I'll give you candy if you just do this for me." Right?
Right.
Like, that's what they're trying to make him look like an actual child predator.
Well, and there's
Hmm.
no way to flip it. They don't leave an opening to flip it. No matter how often the guy says, "I knew this wasn't a minor," they will turn it around and say, "Yes, you did. You knew
Yes,
it
you did.
was."
Mhm. They tell everybody what to believe. That's the problem.
Yeah. No, these guys being fair shakes are not having their 14th Amendment protected. Look at the Shady Grady cases, 295 human traffickers. That's insane. And all it's doing is it's devaluing everybody's real estate property. And he's doing it for money. I just find it wild how the federal government is drying up on these federal grants. And all of a sudden, these cases are becoming more and more as if they have some type of insider knowledge that, hey, money's drying up. We need to make the most we can. And we're seeing it in our cage group where guys are coming up and we're hearing their cases and they're bad cases.
And if they're catching that many child predators and human traffickers, and then there's just more and more and more, does that mean our country, our society is creating them? Like eventually we'll be that too? Because it's like everybody's turning into a child predator or a human trafficker. Like, how do they never run out of catching child predators and human traffickers? And they're catching hundreds of them at a time, like 200
Right.
and whatever in one time, in one place, in one city. That's crazy.
Well, they're specifically using kinks. Um, Shady Grady, for example, he was bragging about it on the mic. I don't think there's a mic out there he can't throw himself on, but he was talking about how guys were trying to have sex with a mother and her child. Well, again, that's not a normal situation. In fact, it mimics a porn scenario
Hmm.
um, that everybody is pretty familiar with.
Yeah,
Not
the
that
incest porn taboo
exactly,
scenario. Yeah.
exactly. It's somebody stuck in the washing machine type of scenario, and they do that on purpose. It's to create the idea that this is somebody engaged in some type of role play, and it's not necessarily the men are into it; they just simply want the sex. So what's happening is they are weaponizing the sex in order to make the men commit the crimes, and then present it as some type of foul play monster going on who was looking for some mother who was going to join in a threesome. It again, they're going to the place where they're having to get on a rocket ship and fly on down to Pluto to make their argument. It's not a realistic scenario that more so builds curiosity and doesn't really red flag people. It's more so just, hey, this might be what's happening here, but I doubt it. But I'm really curious to see if it's real.
Yeah, as if there were ever a real mother that would go online and solicit random adult male strangers to please come over and help me sexually abuse my children. That's a
Right.
scenario they're presenting. And I've seen a photo also of one of these scenarios where it's a mother and, her two daughters supposedly. It was a picture of the three of them showing their rear ends. These were three adult women. And this was supposedly a mother and her two minor daughters that this man supposedly was supposed to know that these were minors.
Was it clothed or unclothed?
Well, the bare bottoms, right? They had like a thong on.
Yeah. So you need to get men aroused for them to commit a crime under the pretenses that everybody's an adult, and then you go, well, while you're aroused, I want you to commit a crime.
Well, I want to know how many of these ICAC task forces have rescued, how many of these children, these ICAC task forces, have rescued from these situations because their mothers are supposedly putting them out there soliciting random strangers to please come have a threesome or foursome with her and her daughters or her minor children, if they are that easy to find because they're just telling random strangers out there, hey, I've got minor children here, please come help me sexually abuse them, why are police not finding them? And why are they not rescuing the children from that? Why are they not rescuing the children from those situations if they're supposedly that easy to find in these places?
Well, the simple answer is none. And the even simpler answer is because that doesn't happen.
Well, yeah, we know that, but they don't want to talk about that, and the public doesn't know that, and they're not telling the public that. Let's talk about what kinds of photos they send. What kinds of photos are they sending, Em?
The photos, a lot of times these decoys or the officers, they do use Google. They search petite blonde in negligee or petite blonde in the bathtub or, whoever the decoy is, and they pull those images from the stock photos and, get them off of Google. But, during the conversations, they'll send seductive photos and say that they're about to get in the shower. That's not testing boundaries. That's enticement. That's flirtation training, not policing.
Yeah, that's coming on to the random adult stranger very strongly while inviting him over, like, hey, come over for this. And they'll also use emotional manipulation. They'll use words like babe and miss you and can't wait to see you. And the goal? To get the man to say it back, to mirror it. Because once he does, they say, oh, look, he was seducing a child.
Except he wasn't. He was led there. Every message, every word designed to get a reaction.
They are literally trained to lure, entice, solicit, and seduce. And once they get the men to reciprocate, which they pushed for, they then say, gotcha.
And now, step 3, the final trap, the final act. Get him to show up. Here's how that works. They've already fed him a wild fantasy, pushed him for incriminating language, and kept him dangling in confusion. Now they just need enough curiosity and contradiction to make him need to know what's real.
And here's something most people miss. From the beginning, these men intended to meet whoever responded and started a hookup conversation with them. That person in their mind would be an adult. And the more the chat goes on, the more unclear things get. He's not convinced. He's unsure.
And showing up doesn't mean belief. It often means doubt. It means, is this real? Who is this?
Dee, given what you know about these sting operations, these cases, how often do you think showing up has more to do with confusion, curiosity, or needing answers, rather than someone confidently chasing after a minor?
I don't think it's probably somewhere around a 30 to 40%, I would argue. That's why we have to give people their due process. Because you don't know what's really going on in that person's mind simply because you can't prove it beyond reasonable doubt.
Well, and they're not given the chance to walk away. They don't go into the situation and sit down with this person and talk to them. No, right away, they're usually arrested and taken into an interrogation.
Oh, but Chris Hansen will say that he went in to talk to them.
Right, but yeah, the decoy, the woman in the pictures, he doesn't walk into a living room, sit down and talk to her, and her to say, again, I'm only 13, and the man given the chance to walk away. No, usually, as soon as he walks in, he's arrested. So they're not given the opportunity to walk away once they've gone to, find out for sure what's going on.
Right. And he can only know for sure who this person is once he observes their physical appearance and their behavior in person. And so he cannot really know or believe this to be a minor until that happens. And remember, the law doesn't say believed it could be a minor, it says believed it to be a minor. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, and here's another problem. That difference never gets pointed out in court. Not to the judge, not to the jury. Most defense attorneys don't even raise it. And it's not because it isn't important, it's because they haven't understood or been told or wanted to hear the truth about what really happened.
That's right. Law enforcement has gaslit everyone, the defense, the courts, even the public, with tactics so deceptive that most people, including the attorneys, don't realize just how scripted and manipulative these sting operations actually are.
Dee, what do you think about this? Defense attorneys missing these critical distinctions, like the difference between might be and believed to be?
I agree. It's kind of a catch-22 when it comes to defense attorneys because not every defense attorney is built even same, and that's simply because they go through a college program where they're taught, theories in law. They're not necessarily practicing the law. That's where a lot of them can get beat in court pretty easily because they don't understand a lot of the loopholes, the tricks, and of course the articulation that comes with it. When it comes to these things, they're not the generic criminal charge, and when they look at them, they they have to find a way to make it not entrapment, or to make it entrapment. I guess the DA has to make it not entrapment, I suppose. It's pretty well written out. The problem is a lot of these go to trial. They have the potential to be a hung jury, and of course the DA is met with a decision of I either have to retry this or I have to drop it. Well, they drop it, they can expect an angry mob with pitchforks, wanting them out of office. So with peer pressure and political gain in favor, they usually just retry them. And we see that a lot, especially with this new Karen Reed case, where it's quite obvious this person did not commit this crime. I've investigated 750 crashes. I can tell you that person did not die from a crash. But there's so much pressure on the district attorney by the police in order to convict her. He's actively pursuing a case that's quite obvious she didn't do it. It's a flaw in our justice system, and a lot of it is really just the way people perceive these types of crimes.
Yeah, in these cases and these proactive sting operations, it's all a setup from start to finish. And the language, just like the setup, it's designed to confuse and convict, not clarify or seek truth.
Dee, how do you think the prosecutors blur the lines? How they try to turn uncertainty into certainty, even when the man himself clearly wasn't convinced?
They'll use all those things like props, the baiting answers, I'm home alone, no one's here, they left me here, something to that effect. Um, it's designed in order to make them look incriminating, but it's not designed to find criminals, unfortunately.
And here's what makes it even worse: the decoys get to choose the age. They could say 19, which actually is a common lie used by adult women on hookup sites who want to sound younger or
Yeah.
look younger. In fact, a lot of men using these platforms have met women who claim to be 18 or 19, but turn out to be much older in person. So even saying you're 19 doesn't always register as truthful because there's already so much deception on those sites.
But instead of choosing 19 or even 17, the decoy says 14, or worse, sometimes even 13 or 12. Why? Because the younger the age, the more severe the charge. It's about escalation. They're not just trying to manufacture a crime, they're trying to manufacture a felony with enhancements.
What does it tell you when they pick an age even lower than necessary? When it's not just about creating a crime, but creating a worse crime.
If you get a man aroused enough through the images that they are using, I mean, Reason's going to leave his mind. He's just genetically predisposed to do that. But when it comes down to it, they're just trying to make it look as bad as they can get it, so they can get a plead. That's really what it's about. Um, it's really not about finding criminals. It's about making it look incriminating. That's why they go to adult websites because they know that they're going to have a sexual explicit conversation.
But most states have where it's a higher felony if the age is under the age of 14. So these decoys that's why they are using the age of 13 or 12 versus using, 14, 15, or 16. So it shows, to me, that shows malicious intent because not only are they creating the crime, they are creating a crime. They're trying to make the crime even worse by making it
Right.
a minor under the age of 14.
They're using people with a vulnerable mindset in order for them to commit a crime. With some of these escort websites, the crime being occurred is coerced prostitution. Well, that person is already predisposed to commit a crime. So let's see if we can get them to commit this other crime while we're getting them to commit this crime. A lot of times, it happens, and again, the district attorney is having another problem where they're trying to show, predisposition, but that person will have no criminal record. They don't have promoting prostitution on their criminal record because they never did a sting for it. It's a place where they really ought to replace the human trafficking sting with just promoting prostitution. So you can, at the very least, get some receipts or some background on this person's criminal behavior. Um, but they decided to kind of opt out of that and just go with a human trafficking sting, which is, of course, when it's involved with a minor and you're paying for it. It's skipping quite a part in the process.
Yeah, it's not about public safety. It's about stacking charges. The decoy has full control over how severe the accusations become, and they use it.
And that's not law enforcement. That's entrapment theater.
So here's the million-dollar question. Why are we criminalizing the act of believing in a fantasy so absurd and unlikely that no rational adult would believe it's real?
Like when they say that this could have been a real child. That's just not true. That is a really wild fantasy because there are no real kids with the behavior of a sexually experienced adult man like we see in these decoys in these sting operations. So let's think about how crazy this really is. This is no different than if the decoy had claimed to be a talking cat who wants to meet you for sex. Would it be animal abuse if you play along with that narrative and show up to meet the cat?
What if a stranger online says there's a 100-year-old woman who wants to meet you for sex? Should it be a felony to play along with that type of narrative and show up to meet her? Would that be elderly abuse?
Or what if they say they are a 200-year-old corpse and they want to meet you for sex? Should it be a crime to play along with that narrative and show up to meet them because the man's behavior showed that he wanted to abuse a corpse?
Of course not. It's ridiculous. But somehow it's a crime when the government says, hey, believe this obviously fake minor wants to have sex with you, a random stranger to them. And you show up to say, what's going on here? Now, suddenly, that's a felony.
What do you think about that, Dee?
It's just, again, it's misleading the American people in order to achieve grant money. And part of me sees it as predisposed entrapment because, again, we have Shady Grady here who's making 295 cases in 1 year. That should be, by the FBI statistics, an extremely rare crime. And it's right on the whims of federal grants drying up.
Yeah, based on a wild fantasy they created that is just not likely to ever happen in real life because they're wanting us to believe that a real minor under the age of 17, would be behaving this way, soliciting random strangers for sex just because they're bored. So, in my opinion, the only people who should be punished are the ones who created this fantasy, the ones who pushed it, because they went around using this fantasy, promoting and encouraging the sexual abuse of children. That was their intention. And they're the ones acting with intention.
Now, they wanted the crime and they built the machine to get it.
Yeah. So because they're promoting and encouraging the sexual abuse of children, and they're pushing their own wild fantasy about this on other men, I would think, aren't they the ones who present the danger to children? I mean, they're showing us what's in their heads. So if we're going to claim that someone is a danger to children because they played along with this wild fantasy someone else created and presented to them, then shouldn't the ones who actually invented and promoted that fantasy be seen as an even greater danger to the children? After all, they're the ones who imagined, scripted, and pushed this disturbing scenario into existence. That says far more about their mindset. And they've used this fantasy to actively promote and encourage the very abuse they claim to be preventing.
If the government really wanted to stop people who prey on minors, they'd do it the right way. Create a profile that clearly says the person is underage in the bio, in the ad, at the very start. Then wait and see who reaches out.
That way, any belief comes from observation, not suggestion. And that would be real evidence of intent. But they don't do that because they're not trying to stop predators. They're trying to manufacture convictions.
That's why we're here, to shine a light on this insanity, to challenge a system that has ruined thousands of lives over beliefs they were told to have.
And that's going to do it for today's episode. Dee, thanks again for bringing your perspective. Always appreciate your insight.
Don't forget to check out ICAC Unpacked on YouTube, Uncage Us on Facebook, and the Lady Justice Myth blog at ladyjusticemyth.blog. This has been Stinging Back. Stay aware, stay critical, and keep asking questions.